dude, I feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, and the ladies, welcome back to another episode of The Farm. I haven't done that in a while.
I know.
Ooh,
No,
we've had a
doing
lot.
the Zoom.
We've had a lot of other podcasts there. We've been doing all the Zooms. All these people have been coming on too as well. We're not sure. If you're listening, this is we broke through that 200, baby. You know what I'm saying? We're on the other side of that now. You know what I'm saying? So it's been awesome. All the things, just personal note, I would like to say to the people real quick, Coat, is, man, it's been a journey to the 200. We were so rigid with how we were shooting them in the very beginning, and then we started building all of the business and all this stuff. But we finally got to episode 200. How many downloads? How many have we had?
Oh, bro.
Like 200 and...
Yeah, more than a couple 100,000.
Yeah,
So.
that's what I was trying to say. Yeah, great. I appreciate y'all. That's all. I love y'all. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for listening in. But yeah, no. One of the things I told Cody, I said I wanted to do a podcast where I want to call it like a let's get real. I don't know, maybe some things, but I think more of the around. I was just gonna ask you two. One is what has, because me and you talk about this all the time, or talk like this all the time, but a lot of times, obviously we're not recording, and I always think that these are good things as well. But, what has been, this is broad, we can go any direction. I have no idea which direction we're going to go, so we'll see how this podcast all plays out. But what has been on your heart lately? Something that you've been thinking about, something
From
that's
like a training perspective?
just
like
it's wherever you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like anybody in life, and then just like in business and as you do things, like just been busy for multiple reasons, just in all aspects. And like, when I say busy here, like in particular, like mostly training actually, which is a good thing. Just, it's where a lot of my energy's gone. I know two people don't get to see behind the scenes a whole lot, but, But yeah, just started here, a few years ago now? So it's been like 3 years. Feels like it was yesterday, but it's been a while. And
still hitting shadow on my phone.
Yeah, no.
I went to go send your number to Allie the other day, and I go to send it to her, and it was asking me if I wanted to send her the name of you. Cody's name in my phone still says hitting shadow, so I always keep it as just the reminders.
No, I mean, I think sometimes too it's tough to reflect when you're busy because you're just like in go mode, and like anybody that's been busy, and like coaches, trainers, athletes, people in life in general, just like when you're in busy seasons of your life, you don't take a lot of time to reflect. You just kind of get in go mode, and I know I've experienced that multiple times just for different reasons in life. But we've just been busy for multiple reasons, from products to some transitions and, life transitions too, and like moving and stuff like that. But been here, just been coaching a lot and like learning a lot.
Anything particular been on your heart? Just like ideas or like a deeper, it could be training, or it could be just like in your life on the same side of that. Like, again, maybe I'll branch off of that idea of like, what reflection looks like, or having those times to do those things, or what, has anything been in particular that
no, and that's kind of where I know I was him-hawing a little bit, but yeah, just like when you're busy and stuff like that, you don't take the time to reflect. And just like in the last couple of weeks, I feel like life stuff has just kind of calmed down a little bit, and so I feel like taking some time to reflect, and just in all aspects of life. And then too, I apply everything that I do, I try to learn as a lesson, and I can apply across the board in my life. But in particular, I mean, everybody, their job, you spend a lot of time doing what you do as a job. And so I let that kind of refine my skills, and just learning more about like relationships and communication, and being able to listen more, and be able to give more particular and like precise answers. And, just something that I feel like that's been on my heart a lot recently is just I feel like in today's society, I feel like people, kids, athletes, non-athletes,
That's how I know.
adults,
That's how I know you're getting older. Is you saying in today's society? That is an old man statement right there, Cody.
well, to be fair, some of the softball girls that I trained
Yeah.
make fun of me daily.
Yeah.
and say,
You're getting old now.
well, they make fun of the words I use, and I'm like,
Yeah.
listen, like,
You thought you were young. You thought you were young. Now all of a sudden,
But-
now all of a sudden, you're starting to get some of the old comments now. Yeah.
well, they look at my Spotify playlist and just immediately start laughing, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Like, what's going
What?
on? And then they asked if they can make playlists, and I'm like, so I guess I'm old now. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I just think too how easy it is, and how like there's just so much access to information and different things you see, here, do.
Yeah.
Nowadays, in particular, it's like not that there wasn't always that stuff out there. It's just so easily accessible now.
Yeah.
I just think it's super interesting how quickly people want to. They'll take the information that they feel like you have, and then they just want to move on, and like you almost become like white noise to them. And what I mean by that is like, okay, so we've been training for a year, right? And how easy it is to be like, okay, like I've heard everything that you need to tell me, right? Or think that they've heard or taken everything that I could help them with.
Yeah.
And then almost, I don't want to say tune me out or tune other people out. But again, it's just reemphasized to me, like the information is really important, but being able to communicate it and being able to build a relationship with people and the athletes that I'm working with, or just in relationships in general, how important it is. It doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, the information. The X's and O's are really important. And like, you can be the best relationship person in the world and be, teaching somebody how to hit a baseball, like shooting a basketball. It's like, you're not even the right sport. So like X's and O's are important. But the relationship and getting them to believe in you and want to confide in you and like want to listen and actually, do that journey together is really important. And then
Yeah.
also too, just in all aspects of life too. Like, got a little sister that just moved away for college for the first time, and like, she's always had mom and dad there, and then like my brother lives where they live, and now she's like in Florida, the opposite direction of us in Vegas. So it's like she's completely away, and it's just like watching her go through that process, and just re-emphasize the importance of me learning better ways to communicate, more ways to communicate, valuing the relationship and communication with people in general. And then also too, just being open dialogue to communicate with people, and just being reminded daily too, like it's just the world that we live in now, all ages. It's almost rare to want to have open dialogue about things, especially things you disagree with, which I know that can go a particular direction,
Yeah.
with you as well, with recent matters on social media. But just in
Not reason. That's all. That's been all the time for a long time, Cody. We've been having disagreements on social media for long times.
yeah. So, but I mean, I think too, it's so easy to want to be like, that didn't work on the first rep, or that didn't work the first time I tried it, so I'm just never going to try it again. Or that person told me something, it didn't work, I'm not listening to that person, right? And then had the softball girl from Hawaii in here yesterday, and it was funny, like her dad made that comment, was like, you could see the difference in the middle of the session when she knew that what you were having her do worked, and she could see it.
Yeah.
Like immediately how like the whole
Yeah.
environment changed, and she started like smiling, the energy picked up, and it's like how easy it is when things aren't going your way to just avoid it, or when people don't agree with you 100% to avoid that conversation, to not
Yeah.
bring it up, to not communicate really.
Yeah.
And you're just not going to agree with everybody 100% ever, about anything. There's a lot of agreements.
I said,
for sure,
I told somebody the other day, I said, look, and this is completely normal, is I don't even agree with me. Right. And again, the piece with that is like, again, it's okay. Me and you talk about this a lot. It's okay to change your mind. And we've become a society where it's like, it's not okay to change your mind. It's like, you said this in 2006, and you're like, well, yeah, but then I learned some more stuff, and like, I've changed my mind. Right. And I think that's actually a skill set, obviously, of being able to change your mind. And then also, as you mentioned, too, as well, I actually did a little bit deeper dive. I know that, there's different ways that people have talked about this, but, one of the things that's, I think, super important, as you mentioned, like all of this kind of wrapped together as well, is that why it's so difficult for us to change our mind. And a big part of that is it's our brain, and also from evolution standpoint, right? We have the evolution standpoint where we don't want to have just practically be super open-minded that maybe this alligator isn't going to hurt me. Maybe this lion isn't going to hurt me, right? Because as we evolved, right? Like it's better for us to be more reserved from changing our mind than it is to be changing our mind constantly. And instead, think of all the things that we assume on a daily basis. As we assume we can get to there on time because we assume our car, we assume traffic, we assume that there's going to be no car accidents. We assume that our health is going to be good. We're gonna assume that the air outside is going to be good, the water is going to be good. Like all of these assumptions that we're going to bring into that decision making or that planning that we have as well, right? But reality, is it's there for a good reason, but at the same time, when it comes to certain things, we can really get defensive about and identify with our ideals, right? Rather than it becomes a hill that we are willing to die on, right? It's like, no, I will believe this until the day I pass away, right? But in reality, there's I think when the Bible specifically it talks about obviously the beginning of knowledge, right? The beginning of knowledge is, fearing God. And what a big part of that, I think, is the humility aspect, right? Like I can't learn if I don't have, and everything's on a spectrum, right? But specifically, I have to have humility in the sense of, one, I could be wrong, right? Of how I see things, I could be wrong. And then two, on the other side of that, I have to have the ideal or the foundation that there could be things that I'm missing, right? And and then also too, for example, you could have facts, I could have facts, and both of our facts be accurate, right? Yet we both don't see it holistically, right? And a way of saying that too as well is like there's the analogy, right? Like you put your hand up to somebody, right? And they see the front side of your hand and you see the back side of your hand, right? And you're like, oh, what do you see? And then you're like, oh, I see these lines and these creases and blah, blah, blah. And they describe the whole front side of your hand. And I'm like, well, I see fingernails and da-da-da-da. And then you're like, there's no fingernails. And it's just like, well, we're only seeing one side of it, right? But what you were saying was accurate. And what I was explaining was also accurate. Yet we didn't holistically have the view of the entire object, right? Because we can only see things from our own perspectives. So I think one of the things with that is like I brought this up the other day, as you're talking about today's society, right? Is a big one is the word like misinformation. We just throw it around now, right? And it yes, and politically you hear it a ton, but it's just it could be everyday conversation, right? And sometimes we say that, right? It's like someone says that this is misinformation when they have a different opinion than me. And we've misapplied that where all of a sudden we've started to convince ourselves that having an altering opinion than me, one, means that we should not like each other. Right. Two, we can't be friends. We can't hang out, all these other things. Right. But I just said a minute ago, I even disagree with myself, and it could be something I said 5 minutes ago. So what does that mean? Do I hate myself now? Do I all these other things? When in reality, it's just like, man, like we got to remember that these are just thoughts and ideas. And while there's nothing wrong with debate and being passionate about what you believe in or other things. And I know that, more so, for you, this is just like character-wise, I think foundation is in the same way is we got into a place there where it's like, okay, well, if we don't have the same ideas, then like compassion for each other, love for each other, grace for each other, mercy for each other, all of these things that play out, right? Like it makes it really tough to have a conversation when we're both assuming the other person's completely wrong and we're completely right. Yeah. And from a foundational level, we have to have that. And I think we need to bring back the ability to disagree while remaining respectful, while remaining loving, right? By remaining, saying the truth with love, all the things, biblically that you could play out. And but I also will say this too, though, it is a skill and it is challenging, right? Because our brains are literally our flesh, as the Bible would say, like, right? Our human tissue, our brain is not wired that way. Yeah. It does not want to change. It does not like alternate ideas. And the longer it has those ideas, again, you can't teach the old dog new tricks. The longer it doesn't want to do that. I didn't mean that, Tank. But on the same side of that, right? It's something for us to keep in mind is like literally our flesh, like literally our human tissue does not like change, and it doesn't like to be altered, and it wants to stay the same, right? And so spiritually, it might not be good for us. Spiritually, it's not good for us to not be willing to change our mind or not to have that. But our brain is literally trying to protect itself, and emotionally, and if you kind of think of it from that way, like, okay, well, what do you mean the brain's trying to protect itself from a new idea? Why would that be a big deal? Well, if these structures are all wired together, right? Like within the, when you have these thought process, it shoots energy this way or electricity this way. That idea is tied to this. That idea, the myelination process, all the nerd stuff, right? But it takes a lot of energy for your brain to remap itself, right? And also too, it's highly dysfunctional, right? Where it's not coordinated. When you're thinking through what you have to, do things takes not only a lot of energy, but also too, then you tie it back to like traumas, and you tie it back to like emotional pain that we only think physical things are a pain, but obviously again, men, I want you to dive real deep in your heart right now, all right? Even though you want to deny it, right? When you're heartbroken, right? Is when you're heartbroken, right? It's an emotional pain that might be felt physically, right? But it is an attack that the body takes as real pain, right? And so I think that's also, like, as you mentioned, right, how that is so important within conversation, right? Is we're both battling our flesh, right? We're both battling how your brain's wired, how my brain's wired, right? And it is really difficult to have some of those conversations. And again, it's a skill you have to stay on top of, right? It's something that we have to work on like anything else, because it's so easy just to get closed off. It's so easy to have a fixed mindset and just think of things as one way, as not as another, but it's definitely, a skill, and it takes practice and all those things.
Well, I mean, I think from that standpoint too, one of the things that it's like, I just feel like in my last like couple years, like God's really, brought some awareness to me is just like most of the athletes, not all of them, but most of them that I work with are younger than me, right? It's like, okay, well, one, typically, not all the time, but typically when there's an age difference and they're younger than you, they show you a level of respect because you're viewed as like authority to them, right? And then as like a coach, what I say, it's very disrespectful for most people, and like they're taught this, that because I'm older to disagree with me or to challenge my thoughts, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times when I'm coaching or when I'm communicating with people that are younger than me, which again, I'm not that old, but that's just what I deal with, right? And I'm training kids and, young adults and whatnot, or other coaches that are younger, right? Is like, I have a level of influence that is powerful, and I could tell one of my athletes that if they want to stand on their head and hit it with the inside part of their back foot, a baseball, like some of them might do it. And like, I got that kind of power and like authority because they'll listen. But with that power comes responsibility, and like, it could go the other way too. But where I was getting,
I'll do a hold right there. Is it reminded me of a funny story with Leg Kick Nation. My boy over there. Steve talks about how one time, or I don't know if he does this all the time or if he did this just one time. He said he had a player come in. They hit for like an hour. He told them all the wrong things on purpose. Kid did everything he told them to do. And at the end of all of it, he told him intentionally, hey, I told you all the wrong things on purpose this entire last hour. And he used it, and you'd be like, why would you do that? But he was setting a foundation of like, hey, don't just take everything I say as like I'm the epitome of information, right? I think it was like a great lesson from him as a coach. It's just being like, again, like I'm not the epitome of information. Like I'm wrong about things. And like, again, like if you're not feeling something or it doesn't feel good or whatever, like we should communicate. And going forward, I don't want you to take everything I say as gospel, right? Like at the end of the day, like again, like if you're not feeling something or there's drills in this or you don't understand it or that didn't make sense, you should bring something up. And the whole session didn't say anything because he's the coach and all the things. But it reminded me of that story because I remember him telling it on social media. I'm like, man, like how funny that is. Like, it's a great lesson as a coach.
Well, yeah, and then like that's been brought to my attention, and like the awareness and like the authority that you have, and then also too just the position that I'm in, being here and working here is like there's some people that look at us as like an authoritative figure of information based on how the body works and the swinging in particular, and so again like you have power with that, but also with that I think as coaches and trainers, another thing that I think is interesting is I feel like we get accustomed to talking, coaching, and if you want to call it like debating people that are of less authority to us,
Yeah.
so that when we reach a
Yeah.
conversation with someone that views themselves of equal or more authority,
Yeah.
we don't know how to converse.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And it's like,
That's a good
there's
point.
not a level of respect. Well, it's like,
Yeah, you're so used to
you're-
coaching, but now you're talking to other coach. We say that. I used to say that with the leadership side of, again, like for example, if you're leading all these teams, right? But then when you're leading other leaders, well, you got to lead them differently, right? Because it's like herding cats, right? They all have their own ideals. They have their own, all these things. They've been successful in all their own companies. They've been doing all these other things, right? And so, like you mentioned, it's your audience is very important when you're how you're speaking and all those other things. And something that, again, as you mentioned, as you're saying those things, I'm like, yeah, me too. All the times, it happens all the time, especially just coaches in general, because we're so often, like you mentioned, like are working with a lot of athletes that are a lot younger or there to consume a lot of the knowledge and stuff that we have for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that when it comes to communication, I think that's kind of where my head goes, is like, why that's so important is, we get so used to being able where it's almost like you have this false sense of I'm always right because the kids always listen to you because you're just an authoritative kid. But then also too, that doesn't mean you're necessarily always wrong when somebody of equal authority or view themselves as equal or more authority in whatever field or space or age or whatever challenges your thoughts. That doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong either, and just like that means of communication and pushing forward and again, not just for coaching but in relationships in general, and just like this goes to, like, I play basketball on the weekends, we talk about, and it's like, I'm interacting with a lot of guys that are 20 to like 35 range, and like I'm like in the middle of that, and so it's like, it goes for that too, of like, we're talking about ideas, we're talking about life, we're talking about their jobs, my job, what we do for fun outside of our jobs, and like our relationships, and just like just all that in general, where it's like, but a couple of them, the ones that I kind of run with, like there's a lot of them that are pretty high up, like the older ones are pretty high up or even own their own business as well, and it's like listening to how they talk, how they speak, the problems that they're having, the conversations that they're having, versus like, the 20-year-olds that just started their job and they're like, man, like I got to show up at 8 a.m. It's like, okay, it's like, and then you just have perspective of like being in the middle of those two. And it's like, well, like I don't own my own business, but also like I've also had, the position to lead some people. And then also like, I'm also not like just walking in on my first day on the job too. So I'm like kind of in the middle of it. And so, just from communication where, I want it obviously to like smaller ecosystem here of like a staff, but if you want to call it like in some business books, I guess they call it like middle management, like you're at the top, you're not the bottom, you're kind of like intertwined in the middle. And it's just like, it's funny because how important communication is. And then I think about the game like telephone, all the time. It's like, you do it in kindergarten. One kid gets a word, and then by the end of the line, it's never the same thing. It's always, it's like how quickly that line of communication can get lost and like interpreted. And then two, I give one hitter a cue. That same hitter hears me give that cue, but they do two completely different moves. And it's like, okay, like, does that mean swinging down is bad? No, just your interpretation of swinging down may not be that good for you. So it's like, we're going to switch that cue, and like, how important that communication and being able to also to observe and like listen to what they're saying and interpret that in all aspects, not just hitting, but, in life in general too. And so, I guess too, just like communication as a whole, also just the world where we're at, like today's age, obviously like, politically, and then also too, like just education, more information than ever. And then also too, just as I grow up, learning different means of communication, interacting with so many new people, moving to Vegas 3 years ago, moving every year that I've been here to a new place, meeting new people and all sorts of stuff. It's just like, all the information's good, and we all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different areas, especially here in Vegas. Tank obviously let one rip.
Oh,
got introduced to that. But it's like I've never been in a place where literally everybody here in Vegas is from somewhere else in this
Yeah.
world. It seems like
Yeah, it's a melting pot. Yeah.
And so, it's cool to hear, hey, like I'm from Alaska. Hey, I'm from Mexico. Hey, I'm from
Yeah.
Missouri. Hey, I'm from Nicaragua. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm from here. It's like
There's a lot more. Yeah. And there's a lot more of people that are now born and raised here now. When I was growing up, everybody was from somewhere else.
Right.
Because no one like even us, my whole family was from San Jose. Like I'm the only one that was born and raised here in Vegas, right? Yeah. So that was the thing. That's why I was telling you, we've had these conversations, is like when I was younger, like I really didn't understand, racism or any of the things, because it was such a melting pot in Vegas. It was just not like that. Like every class had so much diversity. And so like I grew up just like I don't even know what the heck you guys are talking about, because I never experienced it like that. And then when I went and traveled and all those things, like I told you, I worked with Planet and stuff, and we went, the Triangle in Texas and some of those other things, some of these places that were lost in time. You got to have some more, open eyes to like other things that were happening. But also at the same time, as you mentioned, is like that diversity is also really good too, because it teaches you to communicate in so many different ways, right? Because people understand, like maybe there's a language barrier, a cultural barrier. Yeah. I don't know exactly. I know I've told you that I got to play with a lot of like Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Cubans and all these other things, right? So there's all these people, these different Canadians, right? They got their own culture going on, right? So again, there's so many things that's so interesting that we would assume to be normal, and then there's like microcultures inside of our families, and there's microcultures inside of that little town that you're from. And yeah, you are from Texas, but dude, you go from the east side, the west side of Texas, like they are very different. Or if you go from Houston to Dallas, like again, very different, right? So you go to these different places, and they all have their own microcultures, and then you have your own family cultures within all of that too. And it's like it's how many things are getting lost, and all these micro differences. And also too, we're taking certain things personal, that like, I remember when I had a roommate that was Puerto Rican, and he was so animated, like crazy animated, like his facial expressions, his body language, his hands, he'd snap his fingers, he'd smack the tongue all the time. But we were just having a conversation about some other things, and then he'd be laughing, and it would catch me a couple times, like, oh, like I would take this as being disrespectful, but he is literally just communicating, right? Like him pipping that home run, like he doesn't have ill intent behind it, right? Like this is normal. This is how they all would, do these things where they feel, and then they're going to, pop a couple times or whatever, right, before they do things and all that stuff. And so, I think that culturally too, there's sometimes with that, especially now, again, like we have manufacturers in other countries and other things, and so we got to be able to communicate in ways, and also there's different cultural norms. Like for example, like China, I mean, I feel like they're on vacation every other week. You know what I'm saying? Or like again, we've interacted with companies in Switzerland and other places, right, in Japan, and all the way around, and because of that, right, like these guys all have different cultures. And for example, like when we had the team from Japan come in, right, when they came in, like they always bring gifts, right? They come bearing gifts. They always bring gifts and all these things. But it's like culturally, like really respectful, person to person. Like there's these things that are, you would, as an American, would go in and think you're doing something completely normal, and you're like insulting them, right? And so I think that's the same thing too as well. Like when we're insulted by other people's cultures, or even too how somebody communicates, right? In their family, that might be really completely normal, right? Like you catch somebody from New York, woo, you know what I'm saying? They're going to talk different, right? How they're going to communicate, they're going to be like, why are you taking that personal? Like, right, we're just speaking, right? And they're like, and then you're like, why is your voice so loud? Like, why are you screaming at me? Right. And it's just like all of that, right? And it's all of those different dynamics. And then obviously you have individual personalities within all of that, right? So it makes, and then you have all the different roles. In that book, Thanks for the Feedback, I've mentioned it a couple times, but the book, Thanks for the Feedback, one of the things it talks about is roles, and how there's natural friction in certain roles, right? Like, for example, I pull you over, I'm the cop.
Yeah.
You're the person. It doesn't matter, right? Off the bat, I'm writing you a ticket, right? We have this role. I'm your boss, right? And you're going, okay, my job, naturally, I'm going to have to hold you accountable to things.
Yeah.
And so because there's going to be natural friction. So you got to know within certain roles, it's like, yeah, I see why you guys would butt heads. Like, you know, a kid and their parent, right? It's like, I would see why naturally you guys might butt heads a little bit more. Where like, for example, if you and a teammate are together, because you have a different type of relationship and the roles are generally the same across, unless you're team captain or whatever, right? Is you guys are more likely to get along because of some of these other things, right? And so there can be this natural friction of, it's not always what's being said, what's the tone, all those other things. You have to take the context of what the roles are too as well, because sometimes I'm just not willing. You could have said it the exact same tone, the exact same sentence, but it's coming from you instead of coming from her. Right. And it could be, everything else can be exactly the same, and how important it is of like who's speaking in, like who I'll allow to speak into me, or who can have that conversation with me that someone else can't have it, you know? And that's where I think it's important, where we talk, you know, like we obviously have parents do that, where they'll come and talk to us and then we'll go talk to the player, right? Because they're more willing to hear it from us than they are to hear it from mom or dad or their brother or whatever, right? And so, you know, all of those things are so good. I speaking of that, I used to try to read Thanks for the Feedback once a year, because it was so good for me to filter literally all the things we're talking about. Is when you think about things as feedback and you don't personalize like every single thing, it was really good cognitively to like switch how you perceived information and like took things in that way, and a good, you know, like a reminder, right? Of just like, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've read Gospels or how many times I've read certain books in the Bible. I've read this 15 times, but I need the reminder. I promise you. I promise you.
Yeah, no, I was talking to my dad. He helps kind of like volunteer coach at a D2 for the coach I played for my last year in college. And it's just funny because like he's, you know, getting my perspective as I played for that coach, and he's helping, and he's like, you know, trying to integrate his, you know, style in there and yada, yada, yada. So, and it's just interesting because like the communication gets brought up is like, you know, well, how do I get this point across to the athletes, to the kids, right? That, you know, this is what is really meant by this, but, you know, and it was just funny because I'm a big basketball, you know, nut. I love basketball. You know, remember that time
when we went to the Texas high school convention, and we rolled up to, what was that, an EOS, and you just walked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Remember you rolled up, and Cody rolled up and balled on these boys.
It was funny. It was like LA Fitness or whatever.
Yeah, that's what
by the way,
it was.
If anybody's listening, whoever's in charge of that gym, if we got hurt, you're getting sued for sure. We didn't get hurt because we just walked in that thing.
Yeah, they just were like, yeah, there ain't nobody at the front desk. Like, okay, well, we're gonna go.
Yeah, no, I walked in and just balled out, hit a couple threes, did what I was supposed to do. But
hilarious.
You know, just a big basketball guy. And there's a Netflix came out with that thing called Starting Five, and it's got like LeBron, Jason Tatum, Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, I saw that. I haven't watched it. Yeah.
And then there's one more, Anthony Edwards. And so it's cool because you get like deeper insights, and then also too just like preseason of basketball and stuff like that's going on right now. And yeah, I'm a LeBron fan on the court, we'll say. So I'm a LeBron fan. I love watching him play. And he obviously his son's playing this year, and so there's a lot of limelight, a lot of traction to them because like he's going to be the first like father-son duo to like play in the NBA like that, and be on the same court as his 22nd season, which is already insane enough, let alone his kid that he had while he was you know, a rookie, and was like holding him like a little baby on the court, is now playing with him on the court.
Yeah, wild.
You know, which is just crazy to think about. Because of that, and then also too, they hired a new coach, controversial hire and stuff like that, and they were actually talking about how they got a DJ at practice. So the Lakers, they got a DJ playing music at practice, and they were talking about like the environment change. And you know, also the coach is very young. Like I'm pretty sure he's younger than LeBron is. He's the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. Never coached before. You know, a lot of people are like, "How do you get a head job and you've never coached?" You know, he retired 2 years ago from playing. Like, you know, just a controversial hire entirely. And it's like, you know, he's incredibly intelligent. So on and so forth. And so I just think it's interesting because, like, you know, the bits and pieces I pick up is, well, he just, by doing that environment immediately would enable me to listen more, and it's more I'm willing to hear you out because I'm like, oh, like music's in here, like it's a DJ, environment's good, vibes are high, like, you know, things are good, right? And it's like you walk in, somebody greets you at the door, they give you a Gatorade, tells you, hey, have a good workout today, blah, 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 here's the practice plan. Like immediately the environment's flipped from where it was in the past. And then, you know, you got a DJ playing. It's like, well, the culture also dictates a lot of like how communication is perceived and, you know, whatnot. And like, also too.
Because one of Saban's players or something might walk into that environment and be like,
Shop.
this is too, because I mean, even in that transition, right? Like Saban and the new coaching staff is very different cultures, right? And so I knew when they first lost, I'm sure people were going to come in and be like, well, Saban would never do this, you know, or whatever. But, you know, and then, you know, that's a big part with that, right? It's like, and it's not necessarily that I've seen teams do both, right? I've seen teams that are really loose in practice, and I've had teams that I played on that are very loose in practice, and it's like the certain team, the right time, the certain league, all the things that could really work, right? And then your other teams where you got to be so, like they need to really lock it down and like, yo, these kids really need a lot of discipline or whatever, right? And there's different ways of coaching philosophies and other stuff too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then too, I just like I apply, again, like I said, I try to take that stuff and I apply it to what I do on a daily basis, which like, you know, train here in the afternoons, our group, our membership training, where it's like, you know, I got all ages from like 10 all the way up to 18 years old. Not all ages, but from 10 to 18 in our groups primarily here locally, and it's like the communication and the culture of that room, how it can change based on the group of people that we have. So like right now, we have a lot more older kids that have been with us longer than we've ever had because we've just been here longer.
Been here longer. Right? Yeah.
And so, you know, I've had the opportunity to coach some of these kids for almost 3 years now, like going on, right? And it's like, well, that's kind of allowed the room's culture to shift, which then allows the communication methods to shift a little bit, where, you know, now I can use a tool like, hey, Gavin, he's one of my seniors, you know, will you help blah, blah, blah out? Because I may feel like that kid looks up to him. He's a senior. They're zoned for the same high school. That kid's going to go into that same high school he's a senior at next year. There's a level of respect. Not that the kid doesn't respect me, but it may be a huge deal for that kid to hear exactly what I would probably say, or maybe even slightly different from Gavin in particular. Or, you know, maybe there's a newer group, or like, in particular, one that's been really fun is like we've got a lot more softball girls recently, obviously, and it's like I got a little sister, so I was like I get the whole like softball girl thing, and like you know, I've been around and trained multiple softball girls, but it's cool to see the different level of like discipline that the softball girls have versus the baseball guys. Is like those softball girls, they look for exact reps and sets and notes of every single exercise down to a T. Like one of them will do 9 and the other girl will be like, it said 10. And like the baseball guys are like, I think that was 10. Like, cool, I'll call it. You know, it's like, and not that they're always being lazy, because like sometimes they'll do 12. They just don't really care.
And it doesn't mean, and we've talked about this too, it doesn't mean that every girl is like this or every boy is like this, but largely within the different types. When I've trained females and males, I tend to see these trends also with they tend to be, again, a little bit more obedient, a little bit more like want to follow the rules. They tend to they train differently, like in the sense of how they listen to you, how they whatever, right? Males definitely tend to have a little bit more of an ego. They kind of a little bit more disobedient, like they want to go and do their own thing. They want to challenge. They challenge you constantly. And again, like I said, not every group, not every whatever, right? There's cultures, there's all these differences, but there is some foundational things about how we're wired, right? When you have a whole bunch of testosterone rolling through you, they tend to also respond some different ways.
Yeah, and so that's, again, good point, is like not everybody, but as a whole, if I want to, you know, categorize or compartmentalize, you know, in that area, like as a whole, the softball generalize is like as a whole, the softball girls tend to be more like down to a T to every little detail. And they don't. There is no like fluidity, right? It's like
they're a lot more agreeable. Is another term that people would use. A lot more agreeable.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then too, like, it's funny because I use the word coachable for them because I hear
coachable.
And I'm like, hey, like sometimes you're being
I use the psychology term.
Right? But they hear coachable. I'm like, hey, it's like, well, you know, you've tried that before, and you know that hasn't worked. and then that coach that is new to you because you're on a new team said to do it, you know it doesn't work because you've done it
Yeah.
and failed
For you
and
specifically, yeah.
right. It's like, so why'd you just keep doing it all tournament? 'Cause you
Yeah.
went 0
Or
for 12, right?
or bring it up and go, hey, coach, like, you know, I actually tried that in the past. This is what I had to come at X, Y, and Z. And then the coach might go, oh, yeah, some people struggle with that. Yeah, you might just need to think to do it a little like this, right? And because we do the same thing for players, right? They might have tried this or that, and it's like, oh, and then there's a hang up, and they're like, oh, wait, but that communication obviously is so important,
Right.
you know, within those groups.
And so I think, you know, by watching some of that stuff, you know, and learning different means of communication, you know, one that I've kind of used recently is as we've had more softball girls, it's funny because I feel like I've had to utilize the music in the room more. Is like music's always important. Like nobody wants to train
sets
in
a
a
vibe.
dead silent
Yeah.
You know, room, but
Yeah.
it's funny
Actually, I
because
know
the
some guys, but-
girls- maybe he's one of them. But you know, it's like the girls will be like, you know, so focused or so locked in on what they're doing, like it's almost like they're not having fun
Yeah.
in a way, and it's like, you know, they take it like so serious where it's, you know, some people could perceive it's not enjoyable for them, you know, like that's how, you know, locked in or serious they may be, you know, in that particular situation. And so it's like turning the music up, letting them make their own playlist to listen to music that they want, and, you know, and like that broke through, and it's like, hey, and now we're having conversations that we couldn't have 2 weeks ago because simply just the music, they chose their music.
It's so big too, like you said too, and it's like when knowing to adapt those environments. I know we're going off on a different branch here, but you know, obviously I've done, you know, I always ask them like, hey, what music you want to listen to? Okay, you know, maybe they want to listen to, I was about to say cowboy music, country. Maybe you want to listen to, you know, country. Maybe you want to listen to, you know, whatever EDM, whatever they're into, right? And like, you know, classic rock. Also, too, I think it's insight, right, of like kind of how they think or what they like or all personality types, all those different things. Like someone's like, I want hard metal. You're like, okay, like got you, dog. Like got kind of the mindset you want to be in while you're training, right? Or you know, some of that I think could be so useful. But then also, as you mentioned too. One of the things as well is sometimes I'm intentionally playing a certain type of music because I actually want them to do something, you know, to be more intentional today. Or maybe I want to turn the music up and I just want them to kind of like, you know, ball or whatever, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I know from like we're talking about music and like setting the environment and like, you know, how that can dictate certain things, but I also think too, like you know, it opens, it closes, it can manipulate the environment that then leads to going back to that main point of just like how you communicate, right?
Yep.
Is, you know, hey, maybe you don't like upbeat music and you get anxious, right? So I play upbeat music, I get you amped up, anxious, and I got the machine on high velo, right? So
challenging you a ton.
Right, we're challenging that so that I can communicate or show you how hard it is for us to communicate in an environment like that, to emulate this is what your emotions do to you in the heat of a moment right now, and this is an obstacle that we're going to have to overcome, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I know in the past, you know, at least when I played, like sometimes too, everybody would be like, take a deep breath. It's like that didn't work for me. Like I had to embrace it and like hyperventilate and like do the opposite. And so, you know, I just think too, it can set the environment, which then allows or can hurt the means of communication too. Like sometimes, you know, not on purpose, right? Indirectly, I may have a, you know, like a Latin playlist that's upbeat, it's loud, it's got a lot of noises, right? But I want to slow things down and break it down.
Be more
to the athlete,
deliberate
right? And
or
it's like,
whatever.
I don't even realize how the music that I chose
Really
or I let
does.
them choose,
For sure.
right? And they didn't even know, can then hurt the means of communication
Yeah.
between me and that
Or
particular athlete,
for
right?
example, what's an aversion of that, right? Like you're busting people in and out of the cage. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, right? And you're like, their anxieties are really up. We got to get going, guys. We're out of time. We're out of time. Let's go, right? And then you got the guy getting the cage, and he's just like busting through his swings. It's like, dude, like, and this guy, he struggles holding the ground. This guy wants to yank with his back. This guy wants to get jerky, right? He wants all those other things, right? And so it's like, even the tone becomes huge, right? Where it's like, I might need to slow it down. I might need to be a little more, you know, just like I'm doing right there, where it's like drawing things out a little bit to like slow their process down and help them with their anxiety. And there might be another time where, again, like you said, as another athlete, where I might need to get in their ass a little bit, or I might need to kind of like, all right, come on, hey, let's get back to it. Let's do it again. Hey, I need you to really, and that's where it's funny, because I love that it's funny that you said that the other day. We had a former MLB All-Star like in here, right? And again, these guys that have been successful, they've done all those other things. And it was funny because you brought up one of the first conversations that we had when you were shadowing back then, which I was like, hey, I know the X's and O's. I know they're a big deal, all the things. But, again, it's all of these little intricacies that are stacked on, and like knowing how to, pivot and weave and kind of to create this and figure out where their brain's at and how to get them from where they are to like where you're trying to get them to go. And that's different with context of each individual athlete. And that's one of the things that makes it so more difficult with professional athletes, is because they have all these preconceived ideas that have brought them success, and also, all those things. Yeah, they're more athletic. Yeah, they're more powerful. Yeah, they can get away with certain things, but then at the same time they can't, because they're playing against the top competition in the world. So it's like, now the room for error is so much tighter, where there's all of that, and communication and tone and all that stuff really comes underneath the microscope. Yeah, and it's just things that you get with different contexts, right? Like if you never, it's also really difficult to coach youth athletes. If you never coached youth athletes before, and you can't talk to a 10-year-old the same that you're talking to, another kid, right? And so the drills, how you modify certain things, where you spend your time, again, the tone that you use, how encouraging you are, how, what you're trying to teach different groups and all that stuff as well. And so, yeah, everything ebbs and flows, and it's becomes really important, like all of it kind of wrapped together though.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. And too, like I said earlier, like I don't want to run past, like the X's and O's, I do believe are very, very important.
They are.
Because I could have the same communication style I have now and be teaching what I knew when I was
Correct.
15 about the swing.
For
and
sure.
I feel like I would be ruining a lot of hitters still.
For sure.
But also on the flip side, I can know everything I know now and have the communication method that I had when I was 15, and also ruin a lot of hitters.
Yeah.
So, I think it comes, hand in hand. Both are very important. And so like the X's and O's are really important. And like that particular conversation is like, not that I don't want this to come off like, oh, I know everything. It's like, I felt like I knew enough about the X's and O's, and I've seen you go through the process with athletes with the X's and O's. And then I've taken that experience plus my own and experimented with the X's and O's, that I felt like I was in a comfortable enough situation to that. Now what I noticed most about that situation wasn't, well, what drill did you do? Was like, well, how did you communicate that? How did you challenge that? What did you start with? Why didn't we start with, why did we talk for this and then not do that? Like that. I started noticing those key things more.
And also too, you pick up on the things like, for example, with certain athletes, I'm going to spend much more time talking. In certain other athletes, we're going to spend much more time doing, right? And getting them to feel something, right? And where it's like, for his first session with a guy like that, right? We don't need to do a whole bunch of drills and anything. It actually might push them off the opposite way, right? Because you're trying to change a whole bunch of stuff and they don't feel comfortable. They don't trust you yet, right? Rather than if I can get them a feel, but we more along with like, okay, let's get to level ground before we can go to higher ground. And let's agree on the direction that we actually want to work, and get that foundation of trust in like, okay, like you believe in changing this too. And almost on the best way where you can really get it, right, is you get to the point where it's their idea. It's not even your idea. Right. And if you can get them where this is their idea and this is what they want to do, rather than you're trying to convince them of, what they need to work on. When they're like, hey, I know that we really need to work on, what do you got for this? Or, X, Y, and Z, we're like, oh, this is blah, blah. And then, then you start asking them, right, as we always do, right? Like, well, what drill would help with that, right? And there's all these layers of coaching as you go. But I think that's like, again, some of the subtleties that like people miss all the time. It's like those skills where it doesn't matter if you know exactly what this guy would help him. If he doesn't believe in it, he could be the right drill and him not committed to it, or the moment he misses a ball, he's done. Right. Or whatever. Right. He's embarrassed, or he's all of that mixes in together, and you got to pick up the athlete of like with it. And there's certain guys where they got to feel like they're running the whole session, right? I don't know. You're probably thinking of some of the guys like some of the guys we've trained where like they've had to think that they're running the whole session, and I'm planting seeds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, let's just do that same drill you're doing, but with this implement.
Right.
Right. And there's all these things, and they're really trying to work on something else. But meanwhile, you're working on something that's helping them because they're so want to do. And this would apply more to coaches that are at schools. Is like they think they know what they need to work on, right? But meanwhile, and maybe they're not unwilling to hash on that, but to have that a way of how you plant these seeds and get them to help them, even when they're maybe not ready to help themselves, is also a big piece too.
Yeah, no, and that's again, I blanket it as communication, but I mean, there's so many different skills from listening to asking questions to when to be, like I'll take my experience training some of the minor league guys last year. It's like, I felt. And two, this is more me, like I was projecting from my feeling is like, okay, like I'm younger. They're not that much younger than me. Heck, we both graduated high school the same year. They're in pro while I'm training, them, right? It's like, well, why would they listen to me? Like me projecting. But, then I get in the, the session. It's like, I felt like, some weren't willing to listen until they saw me do the drills. Like you were saying, right? It's like, well, if I instantly try to start changing stuff, well, then that might push them away. But then, there was a certain instance where I can reflect back and I look and I'm like, I was trying to communicate ahead of time when really they were already in a position. They wanted stuff to change.
Yeah.
They felt like, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And it took a
The more
trying.
success they've had, the more unwilling they are to change it, which they should be. They should be a little bit more on guard, right? Same thing with us, right? The more success you've had with athletes, you're going to be a little bit more filtery with which you take in, right? You're not going to just take everything in. When when it's at the band and nothing's working, you taking in everything. Hey, listen, with the butler, the whoever, I don't know. I said butler like there's butlers all around all the time, but you don't. The fan said something in the thing. You're like, you know what? I did have a drill that was whatever, right? But if you've really had some success and you've done some things, they're a lot more filtery with which they should be.
Yeah.
So I get it.
And that's where, in that particular instance, I'm like, well, I was trying to talk. Then it was like really the second session where I was like, you know what? Screw it. We just going to do some stuff. We're going to do some drills. I'm going to show you that this stuff works and stop talking about how it works, right? And stop trying to lay this foundation. You don't even know what I'm talking about because we don't have the same background anyways, right? We start doing stuff and then, all of a sudden the third session, we're sitting here chatting it up. Going back, I used to be doing this and like that, I was told that. And it was like, okay, now we got to the point where we can break through some of those, preconceived, concepts
or I can sit here and explain to you what it feels like, let's say, to be in love or do whatever, right?
Right.
But until you've until you've had these relationships, until you've done I can explain to you what a push-up feels like. But we got to do some push-ups, right? And so I think that's the other thing is sometimes when we're trying to connect an idea, what it feels like. You've done the drill, you've done the thing, so you can really articulate what you're, going through. But for them, a lot of athletes that have never felt that before, it's also different with you have a premier all-star that has felt these things before, right? And it's like, I know what it feels like when it's right. When I was one of the best players in the league, I know what it feels like, right? Comparatively to someone that's never felt any of that before, right? And has never felt some of these other things. And like I said, it's always fun, and it's been fun when I've gotten to work with these high level hitters that have had some success because they're like, dude, that's literally what I feel like when I hit a ball 450. When I square up 98, 450, that's what it feels like in my body, blah, 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 right? Comparatively to someone that's like, bro, I've never hit a ball 450 in my life, right? Well, now you're going to have different experiences. Like they don't even know what to, and again, those things matter, right? And so, and it matters where they are in their process or, again, you're explaining it to a 10-year-old, it's like, dude, he's never had to be that braced in his whole life. Like he just never, and you have to give another analogy. It's like, have you ever hit a basketball with the bat or, stuff like that, right? And you're trying to get them to, something they can connect with or create it for the first time.
Keep it even more simple. Let them fail. Trying to do one of those tasks and be like, hey, you know what that felt like? Yeah, let's not do that anymore. Like start.
We intentionally make them do it wrong a lot too.
Yeah, 100%. Like, hey, okay, let's go hit the heavy bag. They hit the heavy bag. Oh crap! Rocks him, bat bounces
Yeah.
off, almost hits him in the face.
Yeah.
You know what? You'll learn.
Let's
not
go hit
to
some
the heavy
sliders.
bag like that
Yeah.
again. You know? It's
Yeah,
like,
let's go hit
I'm
some.
gonna-
Let's
yeah.
go hit some sliders or the heavy machine balls and tell me how that feels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And so, and then too, in all aspects, like, you know, I think it's funny. I think it's funny too. Is like my mom's babysitting some of my cousins this weekend, and we were just talking about it, and just like, you know, my observation of like having all the different kids back there, training different kids, and like watching different parents, like different techniques with their kids and stuff like that. And it's just like, you know, she was like, well, I'm just worried about this, I'm worried about that, and like, you know, this one's, you know, a little bit tougher, doesn't want to go to bed. And I was just like, yeah, like, and you know, obviously I'm not the parent. You parented all three of us kids, right? And like, you know, been around the block, but I was just like, just from my observation, like, you're anxious right now. I was like, from my observation, like, maybe the best thing to do is just let her stay up and then be really tired the next day and be cranky and suck at her soccer game, so that she does. And if she doesn't like it, well,
Yeah,
hey, listen,
then you could
it's
talk and be
probably
like,
'cause you stayed
yeah,
up.
yeah, you know, if you don't want to feel like that, you should probably go to sleep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, 100%.
Then again, and that's another thing,
Wrong.
and that's where you're like adding a suggestion, and it's like their idea. Well, I want to go to bed early because I don't want to feel this way, rather than you going, hey, don't go to bed, blah blah blah. You know, like you
Yeah.
said, and it's like it's another way of making it their idea
Yeah.
and their choice.
Yeah.
You know, but at the same time, you know, all within confines, right? You can't just let them be free and do whatever, right? It's like someone I listened to that thing the other day. It's like what if a parent fish, we're gonna go Finding Nemo here, right? If you see the hook, right, and it's sparkly and it's going through the water, and for a baby fish, they're like, oh, look at how shiny it is, and they're gonna go chase after it, right? And it's like, yo, like they yank you out the water, right? And you're gonna get captured. So a lot of times when we're younger, we chase after these shiny, quick things. Whereas adults, we've learned that these shiny, quick things usually are again where they lead, biblical wisdom behind all that. But again, like with that, how it can be so important. So. No, definitely all these things are so important of community and I mean communication wise and learning like the art of actually coaching, and a lot of it comes back to just knowing people. I think I forgot who it was talking one of the top coaches of all time. He was just talking about like in reality, like if you want to coach, it's not the X's, like largely it's not that X's and O's aren't important, right? But if you just try to do all X's and O's and you don't understand people. You're gonna have a really hard time trying to coach, because coaching is about people doing the X's and O's, but it's people come before the game, you know, before them as a student, before all those other things, you know, them as a person, how important that is. But I haven't actually got to pray us out in a while. I just realized that I have been praying on some of the other podcasts, and like, shame on me, huh?
Here we go.
All right.
Around them for not holding you accountable.
I know. I believe they're like, what, they should have listened to the podcast and
to
said,
the
dude,
pastor.
don't you normally pray at the end? Good Lord. Okay. All right. Dear Father God, thank you so much for this time that we've had together, God. And we just ask that you continue to open our eyes and, you know, and guide our tongues, God, and our communication that we have, and let it glorify you in everything that we say, and the words that we have for them, you know, create, you know, hope and reveal you, God, and just let us just be a reflection of your light, God. And we just ask you continue to utilize us as your servants, God. And we just pray all these things in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, until next time, Farm System out.